Part 3 of my Julian Assange research. So we were looking at Strauss Group. You can verify and corroborate all of this information. So looking at Strauss Group here, Limited, you can see that it's an Israeli manufacturing and marketer of consumer foods and sold through retail stores. So we have an Israeli link. There's also connections there to Tel Aviv, etc. on the bottom. You can see that. I'm not going to read all of this because we haven't got time. And in 2001, you can see, same year as the World Trade Center disaster, Ofra Strauss, Michael's daughter, became the CEO of the company. In the same year, it acquired the Max Brenner chain of chocolate cafes. Strauss was cited, just reading further down, by the Israeli antitrust authority as a monopoly in 2004, a statute that essentially places the company under government regulation, limiting the way it can change the price of its products. So let's look at Strauss Group. Here we go, researching Strauss Group on the right-hand side there within Company's House. It immediately goes back to an address that features in the fraud. Not a lot, actually, but it does feature a very old address, 7 Bell Yard. And you can see it was incorporated fairly recently after I was exposing the fraud. So I suspect what we're doing is we're seeing them collating, not necessarily with this company, but I am finding that probably a lot of these new connected companies is where they're collating all the defrauded money. And you'll see within this document a little bit, but next document, particularly in relation to Lucy Letby, the connection to Switzerland, where it appears they're collating their money into Switzerland. But this was started in 2023. You can see it changed its name. So in January, it was on the right-hand side. We're looking at those dates. January, it started. 2023, July, it changed its name. But going into, on that company, you've got Luke Robin Brown as a significant person of control. Going into his record, on the people record, you've got KBCF. And you can see that dissolved in 2022 as I was exposing the fraud. And that has an address in Bournemouth. So we now come back into Bournemouth, Dorset. Remember, that's where the company is based, where I was acquired these forged bank documents. I don't suspect that is a coincidence. When you search Luke Brown, the name mentioned here, Luke Robin Brown within Company's House, you get Luke Brown Limited based in Brighton. Okay, I suspect that's going to be linked because Brighton, you'll see, then links into the fraud. Companies Made Simple is on that company for starters, so we know that's part of the fraud. Here's another article and we'll come back to Brighton later. Here's another article in relation to Michael Strauss. And it said he started his role in General Counsel at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, or EBRD, in January 2020. Now, banking obviously is hugely behind this. Most banks have a fraudulent, illegal entity company there, and they're massively involved in this fraud against the public. But reading on the right says, Mr. Strauss joined EBRD from private practice as a partner at the Washington-based law firm Harris Wiltshire and Granis LLP. Prior to this, he represented the United States on the board of the Asian Development Bank and served as a senior advisor to the Assistant Secretary for the International Finance of the US Treasury. So he's a very, very important person, okay, in relation to finances. He has worked as a legal counsel on both the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund, primarily focusing on sovereign debt, institutional governance, political risk mitigation, and development in... can't read that. I don't know. Anyway, so when you search EBRD, it brings up quite a few results, but they've all got this company, Aztec Financial Services UK. So this is in Company's House. First of all, on the left there, it's just searching from Google, searching it, and then going into Company's House on the right, you then see Aztec Financial Services UK on so many companies. So let's look at that company, because we then have a link into it, and here they are, Aztec Financial Services UK. And you can see they're based in Hampshire. Again, Hampshire and Dorset, remember I told you, a lot of it's going down there. I suspect it's because of the connection to certain individuals down in that way. And here we are. We then have, via that company, a link to Schroders again. Schroders is the company that Thomas Kingston worked for. I've already mentioned him in part 1, I believe, or part 2. And here we are, we have a connection again, and he was linked to the royal family and was recently found dead. I think it was in March 2023 with a potential gunshot wound to his head, I think. Certainly a trauma or injury to his head. And that was an untimely death. So now we have a link to his company that he was part of, Schroders. And you can see all these appointments, look, all in time as I'm exposing the fraud. They're changing names around in those companies. So here's Aztec Group. Let's look at them a little bit more. Aztec Group delivers award-winning fund and corporate service to the alternate assets industry from key onshore and offshore jurisdiction in Guernsey, Jersey, Ireland, the United Kingdom. Now, this is important. Remember, offshore accounts, avoiding tax, but also the ability to launder money. Okay. On the right-hand side, they're renowned for its long-term partnership approach. The group partners with some of the leading alternative asset fund managers across Europe, administrating over 440 funds with more than 600 billion in euros under administration. So this is a huge company linked to the fraud here. As you can see, they have various offices on the left there, and one of them happens to be in Southampton. Again, all right, all these links to Southampton. Here's a person on the right there, CEO for Aztec Group, Catherine Purves, according to this article. It's come a lot. It says Aztec Group on the left there has come a long way since first opening its doors in Jersey back in 2001 again. Interesting date. World Trade Center disaster. On the right here, we're back in Company's House and just searching Aztec Group. And here's one. The Aztec Group Limited company. And here's Aztec Group Limited, and it's in liquidation, even though it was started in 1990. As this fraud is being exposed, they're liquidating these companies, you see. And on the right, we've got a director from that links to cleaning services, i.e. laundering, potentially. Okay, I suspect they've used that name because of the laundering element in this, probably, possibly. Okay, here's Aztec Cleaning Services Limited, and when we look at them, difficult to find this information, but we go in, and on the left there, we found a document, and that on that document links to a company called MMY Accountancy. When we research MMY Accountancy, it goes to this company that we're looking at on the left. If we go into it, we will find links to the fraud again. So first of all, they were incorporated in 2001, before the World Trade Center disaster. And they are they're Form 10 secretaries. So that's linked to the fraud. Going back in on the right, looking at Aztec Group UK Limited. Okay, we're now looking at Aztec Group UK Limited. They dissolved, as I'm exposing the fraud, in 2024. In fact, in October, 8th of October 2024. So very, very recently, even though they were incorporated in 2007. Can you see the impact that this exposure is having? And they're having to drop themselves in it to dissolve all of these companies, but it's dropping them in it, but also they're trying to avoid accountability and liability for what is coming with this full exposure. On the left there, you can see it's linked to XI Business Solutions Limited in the company address. But on the incorporation document for the company, you've got D&D Law Agency. That's the very same company. It's a very significant company that links into the international government fraud. That's the same company that Tommy Robinson is linked to under his previous name. And within that, you can find the links then to Unity Schools Trust. So we go into the schools. And that had an original name, that school, of Magna Carta School, which I find interesting, Magna Carta. And then we have linked to Christian companies from that school. And from that Christian company, you can see appointments in, as I'm exposing the fraud. And we have a connection to Lloyds Bank again. Remember, I acquired Lloyds Bank forged documents. Lloyds Bank Chambers, here we are, linked to this company. PRJH Management. Back into Unity Schools. We then find a link to a management company that goes to the same address. Remember, we mentioned this address earlier on probably part 1, part 2. So here we are again, Queensway House, 11 Queensway, exactly the same address of New Milton, Hampshire. So they're using the same addresses throughout this fraud. It's all linked through very, very quickly. And through to that company, we have the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Medicine of the Royal Colleges of Physicians of the United Kingdom. So we then have a link to Royal Healthcare Companies. And you can see a resignation in August 2023 as I'm exposing the fraud. And on the incorporation document for that company, why did I highlight this? Yeah, we have what appears to be more royal affiliated connections to Corgi Trust. Obviously, the Queen had Corgis. Council for Administration, Windsor Housing Association. Okay, so connections, connotations to the royal family here. Back into the faculty company, we have someone appointed in 2023, and we have Wikimedia. Okay, bearing in mind we're talking about Julian Assange, we now have Wikimedia companies. And this is coming from that company, leading from that original company linked to Chelsea Manning. The research now coming all the way back into everything again. And it had an original company name, you can see Wiki UK Limited in 2008. And then there's a company called the Middle East Association of Pharmaceutical Medicine and Professionals. So we've got a link to the Middle East. And that dissolved, this company dissolved in 2024, again in March, as I'm exposing the fraud. And then it goes through to the Worshipful Society of Apothecaries General Charity Limited. And there's fraud all the way throughout. We've got the British Diabetic Association, which is an illegal fraudulent company. I suspect they actually caused diabetes through their evil movement. And most of the illnesses that we're seeing, deliberately, I believe, probably by the radiation, the pharmaceuticals, water poisoning, food poisoning, and air poisoning as well, all deliberate. And then we have the Movement for Reform Judaism. Okay, and it's got an address in Finchley, and they were appointed as I'm exposing the fraud, or certainly making inquiries with my company. Then it links through to the Jewish Leadership Council, that someone was appointed there. You can see on the right in August 2024, very recently, as this is all being exposed. They're moving people around. Now, this is very important. On that company name, company document for that company, we have Farah and Co. And we're going to come to a little bit more detail about the Jewish connection of Farah Co. later in this document. And you'll see later, but I've highlighted it on here, you have connections to Southampton companies. In fact, you have connections somewhere on here. I've got the very same companies that feature later. I believe that's one of them, the Royal Automobile Club Foundation of Motoring Limited. Remember, this is a Jewish company, supposedly. The Portland Trust, okay, so you need to remember that, because that's exactly the same company later. That's very important. Here we have other Portland companies. Now, Portland is based in Dorset. There's a place called Portland Island in Dorset. The London Board Trustee, and we have telecommunication company links. So we're going to come a little bit to that later. Now, remember, Julian Assange's birth name, according to that initial research, was Julian Paul Hawkins. So we're going to research Julian Paul Hawkins now. But that, again, remember, they're using, it appears, false dates of birth to try and hide it. But again, you'll see where it leads, and it goes back into everything again. It's no coincidence. So I'm not going to focus on this too much, because I don't think I've actually highlighted a lot. But you'll be able to follow the document, see the evidential links to a management company, to Albury directors, which then links into, and this is important, to lots of ISIS companies. So we're very quickly into loads of ISIS. See this? ISIS. Now, why is this so important? Well, I'm finding a huge connection through to a Faroan origin in all of this, and evidence suggesting that Faroans, I'm going to come to this in a minute, have moved to Switzerland, which is a neutral country, which is where CERN Hadron Collider is located, where they're trying to possibly have created the God particle, I can't remember. But you've also got the World Health Organization that's seemingly based in Switzerland, which is a neutral country. You've also got, is it NATO? I think it's NATO's based there, is it? Not NATO. Can't remember now. But there's a definite connection going back to Switzerland. So here we have loads of ISIS companies. Now, ISIS is an Egyptian god, okay, linked to the Egyptian Pharaohan Egyptian belief system. And we're going to look at this company, which is connected to that director, ISIS Business Solutions Limited. And it dissolved in 2023 on the right, as you can see. But importantly, you can look at the address here, Griffin Tavistock House, South Tavistock Square, London. Now, why is that important? Because it links to this company. Look, exactly the same address, other than the first bit. So Griffin's Tavistock House, South Tavistock Square, London, same address. CAPP Limited is the company. The original name for this company on the bottom right of your screen is Robert Fleming and Co. Limited. Co.Limited, actually. That links through to the Fleming family, links to Export Manor Freehold Limited, where, remember, forged bank documents have been acquired, and where there's massive connections to international trafficking, and also a conspiracy to try and hide the connection to the adrenochrome. But it hasn't worked, because that has been documented. And through my company, it now irrefutably links evidence to adrenochrome, royal family, the fraud, obviously, international government fraud, adrenochrome, the military, the vaccines, the threat of directed energy weapons, to Russia, to Ukraine, to top politicians as well, and the intelligence agencies, all now irrefutable linked via my company. And here we are, we already have now multiple links you'll see to my company, and that's one of them being shown. So the Islamic State, obviously we all know, we've heard about the Islamic State, and the Islamic State is also known as the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS in brackets. So they've also given the ISIS name to terrorist organisations supposedly. But remember, I suspect, and there's overwhelming suspect, that terrorist attacks that have happened are actually a conspiracy between those governments in those countries to start a war on terror, to cause a conflict between faith groups and lead to what we are now seeing, World War III. So also the history of ISIS, bear with me. So I'm just going to come away from Julian Assange a little bit and make you realise the importance of this. So the ISIS group was founded in 1999, according to this research, okay, by Jordanian Salafi jihadist Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. So 1999, 2 years before the World Trade Center disaster, this was cooked up, this idea of ISIS. Remember, we've got the connection ISIS to the ancient Pharaoh Egyptians. So my evidence is pretty overwhelming, suggesting that Donald Trump has been part of all of this, and they're going to bring him in as a supposed fake Christian saviour to enable that move into full digital currency enslavement with the assistance of Russia, Vladimir Putin. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of evidence in relation to that. So searching ISIS and Donald Trump, it brings up some articles, okay? Remarks by President Trump for the death of ISIS founder and leader. Defeating ISIS bluster Donald Trump. So I'm just showing that by searching that. So we're going to come on to that a little bit more later. So ISIS, in relation to Egyptian mythology, was a major goddess in ancient Egyptian religion whose worship spread through the Greco-Roman world. It's first mentioned in the Old Kingdom. Looking at the next box down, she was believed to help the dead enter the afterlife, and she helped Osiris, and she was considered the divine mother of the pharaoh. On the left there, as Hellenistic culture was absorbed by Rome in the 1st century BCE, the cult of Isis became a part of the Roman religion. Okay, her devotees were a small proportion of the Roman Empire's population. Next box down, the worship of Isis ended by the rise of Christianity in the 4th through 6th century CE. So we now have a motive for a Pharaohan belief to eliminate Christianity, because Christianity, it looks like, caused them to disappear. And we'll come in a little bit more to that. Isis continues to appear in Western culture, particularly in esotericism and modern paganism, often as a personification of nature of the feminine aspect of divinity. So what I think we're seeing is and we'll come into this a little bit more in a minute, a Pharaohan historical background in this, ancient Pharaoh, to come in and ensure that sin becomes normality so that people can do what they want, including having their activities or nefarious activities, shall we say, with children of any ages, including the very evil stuff that goes with the abuse to those children. So looking on, among modern Egyptians, Isis was used as a national symbol during the Pharaohism movement of the 1920s and 1930s. This is very important now. So we had a new Pharaohism movement in the 1920s and 1930s before World War II. Okay, now the wars are linked to everything that we're exposing here, okay? The governments can contract out through these illegal contracts in relation to the defence system to illegal weapons manufacturing companies and defraud the public through that taxation system by making the people fear war to make them hopefully feel better about pumping more money into the defence contracts, okay? But they're all in on it. They're really all in on this international government fraud against the public through the taxation system using this fraudulent entity system. It's very important we understand this. So, Pharaoh movement in the 1920s and 1930s. Okay, so it was starting to come back. There was a group of people trying to get the Pharaoh movement back in across the world. as Egypt gained its independence from the British rule. In works such as Mohammed Nagy's painting of the Parliament of Egypt, I'm not going to read all of this because I can't pronounce it, and a sculpture. ISIS removing their veil. So there was a movement here that was suggesting that ISIS were removing the veil of the deception that's everything that's happened. Okay, in the 20th and early 20th century, ISIS itself became a popular feminine name. So we're seeing that it's starting to come into Western society more. Now, Pharaohism, looking at actual Pharaohism itself, just going back to this, was an ideology that rose to prominence in Egypt in the 1920s and 1930s, a version of Egyptian nationalism. It argued for the existence of an Egyptian national continuity from ancient times to the modern era, stressing the role of ancient Egypt in incorporating anti-colonial sentiment. Pharaohism's most notable advocate was the Taha Hussein. The movement largely faded by the 1940s, having failed to resonate with most Egyptians, and was superseded by Pan-Arabism and Islamism. So they've now got a motive, okay, people involved in the Pharaohism movement, to remove Islam and Christianity, okay, who both believe in Jesus, okay. Reading on, Romans on the right there, Romans and Arab caliphates. Under these foreign rulers, the Egyptians accommodated three new religions: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and produced a new language, Egyptian Arabic. By the 4th century, the majority of the Egyptians had converted to Christianity, and in 535, the Roman Emperor Justinian ordered the temple of Isis at Philae closed, which marked the formal end of the ancient religion of Egypt. Okay, so can you see the motive in what we're seeing now with them trying to come back with the Pharaohism and remove Christianity, remove Islam, okay? And if you look at the Albert Pike letter, that's exactly what we're looking at, but with a Luciferian system at the back of it, okay? A satanic element to remove Christianity and Islam and any other religions that actually instill moral conscience within us, which of course protects us all from ourselves and protects others from us through that system to prevent us falling into sin. Now, I think they've, on a massive, and we're going to look at that in a minute, they've massively infiltrated the Jewish religion deliberately to cause a lot of confusion, but they're not. I don't believe they're actually real Jewish people, the people behind this, to actually cause this conflict between these different religious groups. Now, here's Donald Trump. Whether these images are real or not, I've just searched, and I just thought it's important to show you the links to potentially to Judaism, supposedly Judaism, in there. Now, this is important. So we're going to talk about a company called the Jewish Community Centre UK. Now, I had found this a long time ago, actually, in my research, and this document is very important. I have done a video on this, but I think I'm going to include it again a little bit here and some more information in relation to it. So on the incorporation document for that company, you've got Jordan. So it's immediately linked to the fraud because Jordan's is an illegal entity. It's fraudulent. Okay. And you can see Adelaide House on there. And when we look further down on the document, you have Berwyn Leighton Paisner, which I come to later. But on there, this is incredibly important. So this is a Jewish company, and here you have the Charles Darwin Trust. Now, as we know, Charles Darwin was about the theory of evolution. And if that was true, it would disprove all religions. Now, here we have a Jewish company who has a legal and a financial connection via this company to the theory of evolution, which, if true, would disprove Judaism, okay, and all other religions. And yet here they have that financial and legal connection. That immediately suggests they are not really Jews. But look at the document. Look at the other connections on this document. They're so significant. So first of all, you've got various other Jewish companies, no surprise there, but you also have royal connections. Remember, we mentioned that on the other Jewish company. You've got the Princess Royal Trust for Carers. Okay, so that then links into the care system that is so heavily implicated in all of this, okay? We've then got Lex companies. Now, they're important because Lex is part of Lloyd's Bank. You can go and look at this. Lex car companies, I believe they're to do with cars, goes back to Lloyd's Bank. You've also got the Royal Automobile Company. Remember, we mentioned that. We've got another royal connection there. But also, look, you've got the Hampstead Theatre Limited. That company, Hampstead Theatre Limited, links to Ricky Dearman, who was the main suspect, according to these two children that were abused and their father, in the Hampstead child abuse inquiry, which links to adrenochrome, the abuse, torture and murder of children, and drinking of children's blood. It's horrendous. So this is all on this one document, remember, for this Jewish company. But this is incredibly important. All of the directors link to London other than this one. All of the people on this document other than this person. Geneva, Switzerland. Now remember what I said. The Faroan movement, it looks as though they're based in Switzerland, and they've made that a neutral country so that they won't be attacked. But information suggests, if you look at it, that the Alps are riddled with tunnel systems to protect them from whatever they may be planning. And it's a neutral country. I think we've all heard that the banking system is very different there, so it has the ability to remove to high tax, etc. Also, the person within my company who resigned, when I wanted to look at the forged bank document, used to drive to Switzerland repeatedly. I know this because we had conversations about it. They also, on their Facebook page, had a picture of Interlaken, because I used to go there with my family and my dad, and that's a whole nother subject. There's information in relation to my family, actually, which we're going to talk about another time, if I get around to it. And he changed his name he's changed that picture on his Facebook page and removed the picture as he realised what was being exposed. I suspect that's why he removed it. So here we are. Anyway, all the other people on this document link to London, but we have one that links to Switzerland. But what else is important on this document? Well, we have various media companies in terms of book publication companies. We also have the Royal Institution of Great Britain, you can see on the right there, and a company called the Bank of Lumi. They've crossed it out. They shouldn't do that, but they've crossed it out. trying to. I think someone's come in and said, "Look, can you just cross out to company sound? Look, just put a line through it, so it sort of suggests we're no longer connected to it." Panicking, I believe. That had already featured in my research. That exact same bank, which is links to Israel and links Israel to the UK. Also, importantly on this document, we have HMC. I thought that stood for Her Majesty's, something to do with Her Majesty. It actually stands for the Headmasters. I can't remember now, I've lost it. It's for beginning in this document. So that links to the schools. So we now have a link to the schools, and that is a media company linked to the Headmasters organisation. And of course, unfortunately, certainly Hampstead child abuse inquiry suggests that schools are implicated in this. The abuse happened in a school and in a church. And I'm finding there's massive connections to schools. And also the research from Madeline McCann links to school via Julia Vandal. So we've also got here, remember I mentioned the Portland Trust earlier? Okay, on the other document, here we have the Portland Trust again. Okay, but we also have the Yoni Yensa Memorial Foundation. So here's a map just showing that Portland is in Dorset, near Weymouth. Nice place to visit, actually. Went there last year, I believe, for a while with my wife. But also that name, Yoni Yensa, I hadn't heard that before, so I researched it, and it links to the bombing of a bus. Okay, the Albany street bus bombing was a Palestinian suicide bombing, according to this. Palestinian, that occurred on September the 19th, 2002. Okay, so a year after the World Trade Center disaster, almost to the day. Okay, on the Dan bus at the center of Tel Aviv's business district, sorry, not in London, sorry, Tel Aviv district, 6 civilians were killed in the attack. Approximately 70 were injured. Hamas claimed responsibility for the attack. I suspect this is all part of the conspiracy to set up what we're seeing. But he was a victim of that. Among the victims was Yoni Yensa, a Jewish teenager who attended Gush Eldon Yezna, sustained a critical head injury, and his parents signed their consent to detaching him from life support and donating his organs. Yasmin, a 7-year-old Palestinian girl from East Jerusalem, was the recipient of his kidney. The surgery was successful, and Yasmin reportedly has a very good chance of a normal life. The story was widely reported due to the circumstances in Yasmin's organ being donated as a child on opposite side of the conflict. Now, remember, right back at the beginning, we were looking at Julian Assange, and he supposedly assisted with something to do with how to build a bomb with the police. All connected, but a massive deception, I believe. Also on the documents, so looking back at that incorporation document for that Jewish company, we have an NHS connection. See on the right-hand side there, the NHS Trust. They put a line through it. Oh, please get rid of that. We don't want this. But they can't remove. If they block it out completely, then it's too obvious, isn't it? So they've just put a line through it. Also on here, you have the SHAP Working Party on World Religions in Education. So the ability to misrepresent the truth on education in terms of religion to schools. And don't forget, we've got the Charles Darwin Trust on here. We've also got the Anne Frank. You can see here at the bottom there, Anne Frank Trust. So Anne Frank, as most of us will know, I'm sure if we're good at history, was a German-born Jewish girl who kept a diary documenting her life in hiding amid Nazi persecution during the German occupation of the Netherlands. And then looking into Anne Frank, this is very interesting. On the 19th of August 2022, as I'm reporting the fraud, okay, the Dutch researcher Natasha Geersen publicised an 80-page report analysing the annotations and sources in the betrayal of Anne Frank, which argued that the theory in the book was not only flawed, but that the product of source fraud. But the product of source fraud. So there was a scandal emerging in relation to the information of Anne Frank, which was very likely part of all of this deception and fraud that we are seeing. Anne Frank died at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in February 1945. The specific cause is unknown. However, there is evidence to suggest that she died from typhus epidemic that spread through the camp, killing 17,000. So let's look at the Anne Frank Trust through Companies House. You can see it changed its name, look, in August 2001 on the bottom right there. So it started in 1991, incorporated, changed its name, August 2001, just before the World Trade Center disaster, a month after Larry Silverstein purchased the lease for that building, the only person to ever change hands. On the incorporation document for that, Bates, Wells and Braithwaite, links to the child trafficking and to Madeleine McCann. Also on that incorporation document, you have an address in Hampshire, which I think is very relevant. Also on that incorporation document, another Hampshire address and a Bournemouth address. So you then have Bournemouth on that address, on that document. And at the very bottom there, you have, just to confirm, an actual address that is very close to where my company was based. Exmoor Manor Freehold Limited is on Christchurch Road. If you look at that on a map, compare it to Holdenhurst Road, it's literally right by it. Okay, so I don't suspect that is a coincidence. Back to that Jewish company to realise the relevance of this. On that, bearing in mind we've mentioned her a lot, Madeleine McCann, we now have a direct link to the McCanns. You can see McCann Erickson Advertising Limited. This is very important. The evidence from Julia Vandal links very quickly through to this company, and in fact, within 6 companies to Gerald McCann himself. And I think it's 6 companies to the Madeleine McCann No Stone Unturned page where Jerry is attached, so is Kate McCann. So you can see how this is all linked very importantly to this. You've also got the Spiro Institute for the Study of Jewish History and Culture. So that then allows the ability, if that's been compromised, the history of Jewish culture, to infiltrate and change Jewish history and culture, to misrepresent the Jewish religion, to falsify it, and therefore blame the Jewish system or the Jews, shall we say, on everything we are seeing. And I suspect that's what's happened, a huge infiltration of the Jewish religion, to blame it on them, and then remove religions in doing so. And just to confirm, on the bottom here, if you go and look at the actual document, you can search it. All of the directors, all of the other addresses link to London, I believe. Yeah, you can see on the left there, that's the same one. They're all London, I believe, except this one, which is Switzerland. which I think is very significant. So remember, when we're looking at that, in fact, we'll do the rest in the next part. God bless. Bye-bye.